let's get started. Sorry, it's a bit noisy, but let's get started just by discussing just what we're going to be discussing today, which is essentially non-GEMSAS applications to medical school. So, in particular, putting an emphasis on USyd and Flinders. So, I always sort of think this is a great topic because I feel like it's a topic that hasn't really been discussed too much. I know when I was applying to medical school, it was hard for me to find significant information about applying to USyd and Flinders. Most students are pretty engrossed with just GEMSAS, and a lot of people also have this misconception that USyd is just, you just put your application in and you just give me a GAMSAT score, and then they'll just do a calculation and then spit out a result. But it's a bit more complicated than that. I know that USyd applications end in a couple of days. I'm not too sure when Flinders particularly closes. Tom, you can probably assist me with that. But this is really good information. I feel like that every student should know if they want to maximize their chances or your chances in sort of getting into any medical school if you're not too picky with where you go. Throughout this entire presentation, once again, put your questions in the chat, and I'm happy to. And Tom and I will be happy to answer, but I'll just take the lead on this one if that's okay with you, Tom. So really what we'll be talking about today is trying to maximize application percentage. So my number one sort of, piece of advice that I give everyone is if you really want to get into medical school, you shouldn't be picky. You should apply everywhere, cast your net wide, and it doesn't really matter where you go. Your degree is still going to be the same, still going to be a doctor after you graduate, and try and give yourself as many options as possible. So applying to USyd and Flinders essentially gives you two other universities with multiple spots for CSP and BMP that you can possibly open yourself up to. We're going to be talking about USyd and UAC. So UAC is essentially it's like the Sydney's equivalent of VTAC, if anyone comes from Melbourne. So VTAC, for anyone who doesn't know, is sort of this board that allows you to submit your scores to, and sort of like, it's like the body that gives you your ATAR score, which is the score that obviously you get when you finish high school. And USyd, in order to get your university transcript scores, they have to go through UAC in order to sort of use that for your application. And there's a few interesting quirks with the way that their system works, and also a story that I'll tell you guys about my application, which went wrong, but then also saved and went right at the end of it. And then talking a little bit about the Flinders University application, and then also sort of where to go from here after GEMSAS applications are done, after the USyd applications are done on Wednesday, like what should you be doing to try and increase your chances of actually getting into a medical school, especially with the upcoming fifth season. So let's talk about USyd.
Just quickly, Kyle, before we get started, I mean, I know you've got an amazing background. You got multiple offers. Did you want to tell the group about yourself and introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry guys, I've done so many of these webinars, I always forget to introduce myself. So I'm a third year medical student. I've been working at Fraser's for the last 2 years, and I'm the private tutorials lead. So if anyone is interested in booking a private tutorial with me, if you're a Fraser student, you can sort of find me in the booking link. I'm really passionate about helping pre-med students get in, because I was helped a lot by a lot of pre-med students to boost my application and to get in with my GAMSAT and interviews. So I'm just trying to spread the love back. So let's talk a little about USyd and UAC. So in terms of, so I've actually put my offer here just because I did get an offer to the University of Sydney back in 2020, and I had a very harrowing time actually applying to the University of Sydney because I made a few mistakes in my application, and mistakes that I will try to impart to you guys not to make, which it was very, very stressful back during that time. So let's talk a little bit about USyd and their selection process. So essentially, USyd doesn't have an interview. They only look at GAMSAT as the main sort of criteria to get you in. there are a few myths that I'll sort of debunk here. So a lot of people ask me, is it true that USyd prefers to have a GAMSAT score that's equally weighted between sections 1, 2, and 3? The answer is yes, they do prefer to have a GAMSAT score that's relatively even across the board. So for example, if you have like a 75, but you score like poor on section 1, like you're talking like below 55 or something like that, and then but then you score really high in sections 2 and 3, it's actually a weaker application compared to if you score like 75 on all 3 sections, or like an equal score on all 3 sections. Essentially, you have to also submit your university transcript. But the way they sort of get your transcript is through the university admissions criteria, which is a separate website. You can find more information through this link here, which is the first link. And essentially, they contact your institution to get your transcript, and you don't actually have to submit anything, but you have to pay like a small fee and give your student ID and some details. And then after you get that, you get this score, sort of like number. It's called a QAS number, and you have to put that number in your application, and then you submit it to the University of Sydney, and then they automatically get your scores from your university, and then they get your GAMSAT scores based on the GAMSAT ID you give, and then they sort of compute that all into sort of a program, and then they spit out whoever gets offers. The GPA is actually a hurdle, so it doesn't actually contribute to whether or not you get your offer. It's just based on GAMSAT. And obviously, because there's no interview, the GAMSAT requirement for USyd is very, very high, especially to get a first round offer. One thing that you shouldn't fear though is if you don't get a first round offer for USyd, it's very likely that you'll get a second or third or fourth round offer, just because students that USyd offers come out much, I guess a couple of months, I think, before GEMSAS interview offers even come out. So you'll sort of know that you have a sort of like a mid spot in the pocket. That's sort of the way I say it. And then you can sort of and most students then sit the GEMSAS interview, get their GEMSAS offer, and then they reject the USyd offer and accept their GEMSAS university offer. So then USyd has to refill those spots, and that's when USyd gets a lot of second, third, and fourth round offers. So unlike GEMSAS, where you have, it's very unlikely for you to get a second or third round offer, for USyd, it's very, very likely that you would be considered for second, third, and fourth round offers because of just how the system works with them giving you offers early. The pros of a USyd offer is that and I've actually, I've talked to a lot of students that have had USyd offers prior to actually sitting the GEMSAS interview. And a lot of them actually feel quite empowered when they get their offer, because they feel like they already have an offer in the hand, and they feel like they can really just relax and show themselves very, I guess, like show their pure self in the interview because they don't feel as pressured. But my opinion is sometimes that can also be a hindrance because you sort of get into a complacent mindset. So just any quick advice, if you're applying for USyd and you get an offer, it means that your scores are already very high. So don't slack off on your interview prep, because like do your best for everything that you do, including your GEMSAS interview. I was in that fortunate position, but obviously I wanted to stay in Victoria. So I put my best effort for the University of Melbourne. I ended up getting to the University of Melbourne. And then I ended up rejecting this offer. Now, I know I'm doing a lot of talking. Before I get into like my little story about like why all of this broke down for me, Tom, did you want to mention anything about USyd that I haven't yet?
No, nothing specifically. I just think I always love to see these little images of the sort of offer letter, because it's the one thing that I think most pre-med students are like just like imagining. I know I was for a good 3 years imagining the day I'd get an email like this. And I can still to this day remember like pretty much most of the wording of the email itself. Yeah, it's cool that you shared that. I like that. It was a good reminder of how I felt about the actual like getting that email in your inbox, and being scared that you might accidentally delete it or like archive it or something. But yeah, no, continue. I'm keen to hear your story with USyd.
Yeah. So actually, and just on that point, I think on the morning before my offer, like one thing that I'll say is I like, and you'll find this when you get your offers later, guys. Like, you sort of remember exactly what you do, and there's a bit of tension because, like, you know, usually it's like anticipated. USyd's pretty good. They actually tell you when offers will come out. So I sort of bookmarked that day, and then I remember I was pacing. I couldn't sleep the night before, but yeah. Anyway, my story with USyd. So the reason why you have to be careful with this is because there's actually a lot of sort of links in the chain that can go wrong in this application process. And after speaking to some other colleagues of mine who actually applied to USyd, a lot of them actually had the same issue. So oftentimes for university, you get, especially if you do your undergrad and you're just coming out of undergrad to go to postgrad, then you need to pay like fees for your subjects, whether it be like an amenities fee or just like something small like a library fee or something like that. And for me, I came from the University of Melbourne, so we had to pay this amenities fee just, I think, 3 or 4 weeks before the application was due. And I missed that email completely. So I submitted my UAC application. I put my statement of results, or my student ID to get the statement of results in. But I actually didn't know that because I hadn't paid my fee, the University of Melbourne actually withheld my results from being released. And apparently this is not an uncommon thing, because in other universities, you know, you have fees that you need to pay, or potentially a particular requirement that you haven't met for the university, doing some modules for consent and all that sort of stuff. And if you don't do those and you're not up to date with those, the university doesn't release your results. And if they don't release your results, UAC can't look at what your GPA is. And if they can't do that, then your application becomes void. But they don't tell you that they can't get the results. So you're sort of left in the dark with it. After you submit your application, after about a month or so, they sort of process your GPA, and then you can actually request for your GPA to be calculated, and you can check and see what GPA they've calculated for you. Because I think their GPA calculations are a bit different to normal universities. I'm not 100% certain as to what the calculation is, but I know it is a bit different. And being a sort of an absent-minded student at the time, like, I didn't actually check that particular document after a month. And I think about like a month and a half after I submitted the application, I was in a position where I realized that I had no GPA attached to my application. I realized why, so I paid my fee. And then I was sort of stuck in limbo, because I thought to myself, oh, look, surely they'd fix this issue. But USyd's pretty useless with pretty ruthless with this sort of stuff. So I sort of went back and forth in a few emails with them, and I asked if they could consider my application. And initially, I actually got an email that said, no, like, we're gonna void your application because of that. You'd have to apply next year. But I had timestamps that sort of showed that I paid within the time frame for my UAC application. And luckily I had screenshots, because I had screenshots of the payment, and I ended up submitting it to them, and they ended up reconsidering my application, and they ended up getting a first round offer, which was pretty awesome. And when I was speaking to my friends who actually were going through the same process, they had the same issue, but they also had other issues where the system didn't spit out a QAS number properly. And some students actually forgot to put the QAS number in their application. And there are all these like sort of small things that you have to just check to make sure that are ticked off, because USyd doesn't actually let you know that there's things missing. If things are missing, they'll just let the application process go. And it's really up to you to check and to ensure that things are okay. So I guess my warning for everyone who's applying for USyd is just make sure that you go through each step of the application process and make sure everything is checked, read everything properly. And after you've submitted your application and you've submitted your GPA to UAC, make sure that you actually check what GPA they calculate for you. Because if they don't calculate a GPA for you, or if it's unavailable, then you know something's gone wrong, and then you can actually fix that. So yeah, we actually have a question as well. I'm just going to sort of deviate a bit away. But the question said, just looked on USyd website and the application link is broken. Also, the QAS is closed. Has the application window closed? I believe it closes in 2 days. Yeah, sorry.
So it closes on Wednesday, the 8th of June. We've actually had reports from lots of students and people that it's been like crashed for about 18 hours, and it's like a USyd wide thing. And so we think that maybe they've just had a lot of like traffic in the last couple of hours. But yeah, it's been like that for 18 hours. So it's a very new thing. But the application is due to like close on Wednesday. So yeah, lol, lots of traffic.
Yeah.
Not going to make you feel good, is it?
Yeah.
You guys go.
Yeah. Like with regards to USyd, I think, as I mentioned before, I think it's always good to sort of throw your hat in the ring for the for USyd applications. You know, the GAMSAT cutoff is really high, but that's because a first round offer is obviously, you know, like there's going to be a really high cutoff for that. But anything second round, third round, fourth round, when students start accepting GEMSAS applications and start, you know, accepting their GEMSAS universities, the application sort of threshold will go down. You know, I had students and I've had friends as well who've applied to go to USyd, and they got offers pretty much like 2-3 weeks out from starting medical school as like a third or fourth round offer. And you know, I think having that option, keeping it up there is always good, especially if your GAMSAT's like 70 plus. I think it's definitely worthwhile. That's pretty much all I got to say about USyd.
I will say,
yeah,
like with these like late round offers, it like USyd is the #1 university for late round offers. I reckon at least 40% of their cohort are late round offer acceptances. I would say it's good to have your hat in the ring, so that even if you do go through your GEMSAS interviews and you're unsuccessful and you just inevitably like you weren't where you wanted to be, you've at least got another hat in the ring to always like build your confidence. You don't want to be going through that whole application process and just be underwhelmed. I guess with that as well, with your USyd late submission, what was I going to say there? I've completely lost my train of thought here. You continue, Kyler. I'll come back.
all good, all good, all good. Yeah. So I guess look, if anyone has any issues with like navigating the USyd application or anything with UAC, I'm happy for you guys to give the phrases sort of email, like the support email, a little buzz, and I'm happy to respond. I'll also give my own personal email, so you can just message me if you have any questions. But yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just make sure to check that everything is actually ticked off.
Yeah, sorry, I just remembered it too. I'll put the email in the chat in a minute here, so you guys can ask questions after this as well. But I remembered there was actually like 3 people I remember specifically from last year who got offers to like their lower GEMSAS preferences. And like they had pretty much accepted those GEMSAS preferences. They were like away from where they lived. All of them lived in Sydney. And like one got like, I think it was Griffith, couple got like Notre Dame Fremantle, and they got the late round USyd offer, and it sort of saved them having to move away, and they'd like packed up a lot of their place and were just about ready to move, but then they at the very last minute cut off the UNDF offer and stayed put in USyd. So it's also like, if you are someone from Sydney and you're trying to stay in Sydney, it's another way to keep your hat in the ring for Sydney, because there's only limited medical schools there. That's what I was going to say before.
It's a really, really good point. Really good point. Yeah. So yeah, if anyone has any additional questions about Sydney, just put it in the chat. And if not, then we'll just push on here. So I'm just, emphasizing the point of maximizing your entry percentage by applying everywhere. But I just want to just emphasize that, ultimately when it comes to sort of med, you just need to think about preparing the best that you can and maximizing your percentage everywhere with your application and also your performance. And, try to get as much help as you can. Being here in this webinar, you're pretty much already doing pretty much better than most of the other students who aren't, if you're thinking about applying to USyd or Flinders, because you get a bit more information from people who have actually gone through the process. So you should pat yourselves on the back that you're taking a good first step. So Flinders applications. So it's kind of hard for me to talk about Flinders just because I didn't actually interview there, but I did get an offer to interview there. And I can talk a little bit about just my experience with how I was able to get an offer, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about quotas and cutoffs for scores, especially for non-Flinders applicants. So one of the most common questions that I get is students read this in the handbook, in the Flinders handbook, which is linked through this PDF here, which you should go and read. And they can see that non-rural, non-humanitarian visa, non-Flinders graduates, the cutoff for an interview was 78 in the, for your GAMSAT, and that's really high. I just want to sort of say that with Flinders applications, I got an offer with a lower GAMSAT, these offers are only reflective of first round interview offers for Flinders. They're not reflective of subsequent round offers. So I'm not sure what round of offers that I got, but I remember I got a Flinders interview offer after my GEMSAS interview was finished. And that's late. Like this is very, very late. And once again, I'm just trying to emphasize the point that like if you do apply for Flinders and you don't get a first round offer, don't lose hope, because there are subsequent interview rounds that do happen, and you might be able to get a second or third round like interview offer, and the threshold does decrease because these numbers are a bit misleading with the actual truth. The other thing I also just want to mention is for anyone who doesn't know how the Flinders interview runs, like it's a panel interview instead of a multiple mini interview. So the interview is a little bit different in terms of structure, compared to all other GEMSAS universities usually do multiple mini interviews. So you need to think about, if you're putting your hat in the ring for Flinders, you need to think about like potentially having a little bit of a different type of preparation for a panel compared to a multiple mini interview. I also sort of put some other information here about the Northern Territory Rural Program. So Flinders is a university that really emphasizes rural health, and you have actually some really great opportunities at Flinders to do some work in rural areas, especially in the NT. And I think for anyone who's interested in rural medicine, this is a really great option. And in terms of uploading a transcript, you need to go through this process, which is called the MyEquals. Like essentially what happens is you create an account with them, and then you submit your transcript to Flinders University through MyEquals, and then they spit out a GPA for you. It's actually much easier than UAC for USyd. Pretty much, I don't think you can go wrong with Flinders applications, but if anyone does have any questions, you can just refer them to the Fraser support email. I don't have too much else to say about Flinders since I didn't interview there, but that's my experience with it and just my 2 cents on the topic. Do you have anything to add, Tom?
There was a question in the chat. I'm curious on what your answer is, Kaiwen, does Flinders prioritize spots for Flinders graduates?
Yeah, so actually that's a good point. I did want to mention this as well. So for Flinders graduates, the threshold to get an interview is lower. So in that sense, they're preferencing Flinders graduates because they'd rather students from Flinders stay. But it doesn't necessarily mean that if you get it doesn't mean that they're definitely gonna, I guess, favor them. It really depends on how they go on the interview as well, which means that if you get an interview offer and you're not a Flinders graduate, you're pretty much going to be on equal footing with anyone who actually gets an interview, and it depends on how you do on the day. One other thing that I will mention is they do have, I don't want to say this is like a hack, but it's, I know that there have been students in the past that have done Flinders like diplomas or like mini degrees at Flinders, so that they can become eligible for the Flinders graduate bonus, so that the cutoff for your GAMSAT and your GPA is lower. So for anyone who's in the boat where you're thinking about your scores and whether they're actually competitive enough, this could be an option for you if you want to do a diploma or something along those lines, like further study at Flinders. You can definitely do that, and it'll definitely boost your score because you get quite a significant percentage. If you just look at the GAMSAT score intakes, non-Flinders graduates for a first round offer is 78, but then Flinders graduates it's 69. That's 9 points or 9 percentiles lower. So definitely consider that if you're in that boat. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. Tom, do you have anything else?
We do occasionally see, people who maybe have reached the end of their undergraduate degree. Maybe they've even done an honours or a master's and they're just applying this year. And so if you're in that boat, or like you've even attempted to do some postgraduate training, that is certainly one to pick for you. I mean, it really depends. I would make that decision around your GPA and GAMSAT, because if your GPA and GAMSAT are particularly decent, it might be worth actually just entering the workforce, building good experiences, building a portfolio, doing something else for a bit and keep applying. Whereas if your GPA and GAMSAT are particularly low, particularly the GPA, I'd say that's going to be like a valuable probably pathway to go down, because you can edit your GPA through it, you can get the boost through it. And a GPA is not something you can fix while you're in the workforce. You have to sort of be in university to fix a tough GPA. A GAMSAT you can fix because you can go into the workforce, go into allied health, do something like that, and continue to take the GAMSAT. So yeah, it's a particularly good solution to the GPA problem if you've already done an honours and you've already, done as much postgraduate sort of university as you can. So that's sort of my position on it, is like the utilization of that is better in some cases than others.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I actually have received a lot of emails recently about sort of options, with sort of asking me about options as to whether you should do an honours or whether you should do another degree. I think, like GPA is a really tough one to fix because it takes a lot longer to actually fix your GPA because it's more permanent. Whereas a GAMSAT score, you can just reset the GAMSAT multiple times, and hopefully you just improve from that because there's 2 sittings per year. So
I would say doing an
options.
honours would be a better way to improve your GPA than the Flinders program. That said, if you've already done an honours, then that's probably like the next thing you would do.
That's really good advice. Yeah. So yeah, that's unfortunately there's really not much else to say. It's quite simple actually with Flinders and USyd. I was wondering if anyone else has any particular questions about both these application pathways. If not, I just want to touch a little bit about interviews and sort of what sort of will come up next over the next few months, because I think this is an interesting sort of limbo period that I sort of found myself in back when I was applying, which was once GEMSAS and USyd applications is sort of over, what do you sort of do in between then and when you actually get your interview offer? And I think a lot of people are thinking about that at the moment. Tom, I'm sure you can speak from your experience as well. I'm not sure how much you've prepared for interviews during this period, but what was your strategy?
My strategy was starting earlier. I think I started in early July, so actually a little bit late. I think, the key thing now, since I've been teaching for 4 or 5 years now in this space, I think one of the fundamental issues that every pre-medical student oversees is they go, I've done really well in my GPA, I've done really well in my GAMSAT, I'm going to do really well in my interview. But it's a huge fallacy because they test completely different things. And often the people that did poorly in their GAMSAT and GPA, if they can get to the interview phase, they're actually going to get an offer into the medical school before someone that got higher scores that maybe did worse in their interview. the interview is the final hurdle. It's the thing that differentiates you from your teammates. It's completely different assessment to the other two items. And so many people like underestimate the importance of preparing. So if you had to prepare similar to like what I did, I would start early. I obviously used the course as I went through it. At the time, it was a much smaller set of classes, and that was handy. Since then, and since I've managed the program, we've expanded it to be a 6-week program with a full revision session at the end, and group tutorials along the way that are interactive. So there's great teaching to do if you're interested. I wanted to throw out just on this topic, a question to everybody. Is anyone looking at doing any pathways outside of USyd, Flinders and GEMSAS? Any like pathway programs, ANU Health Science, Monash, UniMelb, anything like that? No. We'll keep an eye on the comments for that one. Kai Wen, what was the question that was just in the chat here?
So the question here was, I'm currently doing a master's of a research master's. Does USyd or Flinders count that count that in any particular way with reference to GPA? So I was just just from my own just understanding, USyd, your GPA is just a hurdle, and they just take the previous 3 years. But for Flinders, I'm actually not 100% sure. You'd have to check the handbook. Tom, would you have a bit more of an idea?
No, not my specialty area, but I will say, yeah, I could talk about interviews all day long. But yeah, is there anyone that's got any questions or anything? We don't have a lot of content today. We just wanted to make ourselves available and really talk about any of these applications process. It's a tender time to be a pre-med student, right in the middle of this sort of application season at the moment.
Yeah, like we know exactly how it feels. We've been through exactly where you guys are at the moment, and we know how nerve-wracking it is, and there's a lot of uncertainty going on, especially with applications and whether you're not getting an interview, especially the university that you're at. So
sometimes it's really high pressure, Karen. Like I had a friend last year who had smashed the GAMSAT, smashed the GPA. I think they had a GAMSAT of 90, GPA of straight 7. And they for I think it was 3 years in a row, consistently got interview offers at ANU, because that was their top preference, and they lived in Canberra. And they just consistently got an interview offer. And I've known them for 3 years, and they know that I do this for a job. And they were like, "No, I don't want to bother you. Like, don't worry about talking to me." And he did the interview twice without like actually preparing for it, because he was like, "Oh, it'll be fine." The third time round, so it was late last year, I sat down with him, and like just you can tell that his answers were not like well thought out. He had the crux of it, and a lot of people do. A lot of people come into this pre-med game where, they've got family who were, in the medical workforce, and they're able to align with a lot of the values that doctors have. So he specifically, his mum and his partner were nurses. And so he'd grown up in this culture of the mum coming home and telling stories about patients that she'd seen. And, he heard all of the tough situations, occasionally would go there after school, things like that. So he was involved in the environment, and he was able to pinpoint specific things that he liked about that environment and what he wanted to do with himself. But when it came to actually answering the question, why do you want to study medicine? He was just like, "Oh yeah, I think medicine would be really cool. My mum was a nurse. And so like growing up with that, I think it would make me a really good doctor." And I'm like, yeah, like, so he gave a very vague response. And yes, he had the crux of it. When you actually get down deep, he was able to pinpoint specific things. I like the fact that I was able to help people that were in an immense level of need. People get emotional about these decisions, and he felt like he had good emotional intelligence. And so he was able to talk about all of these things once we had that chat and we got him through those difficult questions, aced the interview, and he's studying first year medicine at ANU now. And he was under a lot of pressure because in the 3 years, he'd had a baby and like was getting married and things like that. And he needed to get a move on with his career. So it was very high pressure. Someone's asked when the interview course starts. So the interview course starting dates are flexible. So we've got 3 cohorts of classes and you can join any of the classes in any of the cohorts. We're about halfway through the first cohort now. The next cohort is starting in about 4 weeks. But if you joined now and you caught the end of the classes, you could catch the first half of the next classes and get in. Or if you join now, you would be able to review the online resources and be prepared for the classes. So essentially, you can join at any time from now until late September. But the earlier you join, the more access you have to classes, the more time you have to prepare, the more time you have to sit with the resources. And so the interview course start date was actually 2 months ago, but you can still join now and have access to all of the classes and things. And we obviously do like some of the more detailed things like the private tutorials and mock interviews in that peak season. Once you've developed those core fundamental skills, that's when you actually practice using those specific mock interviews, using the times, using the formats, the question types, the questions that we know are going to be asked on that type of interview. Next one. Yeah, go on. Do you want to answer?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sure. I'll answer this one. So the question here is, if you get a USyd first round offer, can you wait until GEMSAS place offers come out to decide, or is there a time limit to accept? So there is a time limit to accept, but from my experience, the USyd time limit is, I believe, in December, and that's much longer than when the GEMSAS offers come out. So yeah, you can definitely wait and you can sit on your offer without accepting it. They won't retract it or anything like that. And when you get your GEMSAS place, you can decide which one you'd like to choose. Tom, you're muted.
Yeah, so we often get asked this question in undergrad medicine as well, applications, because they have a very stagnant dates over the second half of the year where their interviews are all spread out very like across that second half of the year. And so they'll get an offer to a school and then they won't even know the outcome of another university they've got an interview offer at till after the due date. And so if you do find yourself in that position, if USyd changes it this year, or there are some issues where the due date is prior to when you're actually finding out whether you were successful with another interview, we always say just accept it and hold it, because the best thing, the easiest thing you can do in like the worst case scenario would be to just start the course and spend, I think it would be like $3,000 for the first semester of the course, but still transfer to the other one. So you can accept one and then go and take the other one in the worst case scenario, but just wait until the due date if you can.
That's good advice. Yeah, you can always withdraw early and then just,
withdraw.
Yeah. Just moving back to just interview preparation, I guess, like Tom gave a really great story of someone who got crazy good scores. And I just wanted to say that it's not uncommon for that to happen. If you get really amazing scores in your GPA and your GAMSAT, the interview is a different phase of the application process, and it really does differentiate students. So I knew that going into the interview in 2020, and I prepared really early. So I started pretty much about the time that USyd applications were due. So I pretty much started about now, and I was already starting to think about, if I got a question that asked me why I wanted to do medicine, what I was sort of doing a lot of reflection and thinking to myself exactly what I would say that's from my heart. A true and genuine reason as to why I would want to do medicine. And then at least when I'm starting my more formal preparation with phrases, then it's something that I can take that, bring it to a tutor and say, hey, look, I've got these as the bare bones of my response. And I'd like to just know how I could mold that into something that sounds a little bit more fluid, that can actually, make a good impression on an examiner. My suggestion for anyone is, if you're feeling a little bit burnt out at this time of year. You've just done the GAMSAT, you've just done all these applications, you're thinking about all this. It's just, and you're a little bit, stressed and you want a bit of a break. That's perfectly fine. But it's always good to just start thinking about these things, like start thinking about a time that you had to make a difficult choice. Start thinking about just start reflecting on your own life and think about some anecdotes that you can tell in an interview that could show more of who you are, so that you're not sort of stuck late trying to scramble for these sort of sorry, someone just entered the chat. You're not scrambling for these anecdotes later, and you're a bit more prepared. So timing your run is really important, and that would be my best advice for anyone who's in that boat. So, yeah.
All right, shall we move to the next slide? And just a reminder, if anyone wants to derail our conversation and ask any questions, you're welcome to do that in the chat below.
Yeah, for sure. So, we actually do have. Yep. So, does ANU offer Commonwealth supported places? Yes, they do. Pretty much almost all the GEMSAS unis offer Commonwealth supported places, I believe, barring Macquarie University, which is just a full fee university.
So there's three place types. There's the full fee paying places, which is Macquarie and Bond. There's the Commonwealth supported places, which is like the default for all universities except for Macquarie and Bond. There's some universities that offer both full fee paying or Commonwealth supported, and you can elect to pick one. And then they all offer bonded supported places, which is about a third of the final cohort in every medical school needs to be under the BMP scheme as part of the policy. And so, that's probably something to note as well, is that there's a lot of value in connecting with that BMP scheme. Are you BMP, Carmen?
I am BMP. Yeah, same thing with you, Tom. And we did a really great webinar actually a couple of weeks ago. If anyone wants to check that on our Fraser's Medical YouTube. So, and we talk about BMP and CSP and full fee places. Yeah. So I'm actually going to leave this next little bit for Tom. I'm going to just head off because I have exams coming up. So it was great to chat to everyone about USyd and Flinders. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email me. I've put my email in the chat, but I'll sort of bump that downwards here. Again, if anyone has any particular questions, I'm happy to chat and happy to help. Okay.
Awesome.
See you guys.
So just I'm gonna leave it open for about 10 more minutes, just to have for any Q&A you've got about your applications. Obviously, I'm quite specialized in GEMSAS applications and interviews, so I'm able to provide lots of information on that. And as I manage the interview program, I'm able to give you any teaching you need. So if there's any questions you particularly have about interviews or anything you want to know about interviews, I'm happy to answer. Is there any areas that you guys are uncomfortable with when it comes to interviews that I can give you advice on? I'll just be hanging out in the chat here for the next 10 minutes as well. So if anyone wants to unmute and ask questions, you're welcome to do that. If you want to head off, you're welcome to. But yeah, we're just having a good time. I might put my email in the chat as well. So if anyone wants to ask a question afterwards or reach out about any programs, you're welcome to do that. Cool. All right, I might wrap it up. Thanks for coming along. Oh, we've got someone who's asked a question. Honestly, the whole interview phase seems so daunting. Is there a big emphasis on rural health in the MMIs? Yeah, so particularly for Wollongong. They love their rural health questions, and ANU also has at least half a panel which will be on Wollongong. So there's lots of questions that will be asked, in ANU about rural questions. The expectation for postgrad universities isn't that you like have a very in-depth knowledge of rural health and rural health theory. We sort of teach it to give you a bit of base work to sort of know where to build your answers off. But often they'll actually present you with the problem and the tools to fix it. And your job is really to solve the problem using those tools. So they might say to you in the prompt of the question, we've noticed that there are much less doctors that are presenting rurally and that are working in rural areas. One solution for this is the BMP program. Do you think this is a good program? Do you think it is going to help the doctors' workforce in rural areas? Or are there other ways that you would solve this problem? And so the expectation isn't that you know that program in detail. And if you ask, you can actually get a description of the program. But it does sort of get you to use your problem-solving skills in the context of rural health. And so, yeah, I hope that answers your question. Most universities will have rural health questions. University of Wollongong and ANU particularly have lots of rural health questions. And the nature of the rural health questions isn't as hard as you'd think it would be. That's not it. I might give it another 30 seconds. And if there's no questions, I'll thank you all for coming along tonight. What about UQ? Is rural health a priority there too? Yeah, it is. UQ will ask one of I believe they have 6 stations. They had 6 last year. And so one of those 6 will be on rural health. There'll likely also be one on Indigenous health. So that's 2 out of 6 that will be sort of on that like public health approach. There's often a motivation question, and then there's a mixture of the remaining question types in the remaining 3 options. Someone's asked about cutoffs for both GPA and GAMSAT scores. It varies a lot, and the official websites don't really help. What are the acceptable scores to apply or consider retaking the exam or honours year? I think you should apply at anything above probably above 50, 55 for GAMSAT, and anything above a 5 in GPA. So you should apply. And so as you can see, that's a very low threshold for applying. But naturally, you can't win the race unless you've got a car in the race. And so that's what I would suggest in terms of the low threshold for applying. To consider taking another exam or doing an honours year, you would do that in most cases where you've been unsuccessful with medicine or whether your score have like not been where you want it to be. So a competitive GAMSAT score these days usually breaks the 72 mark. If you're above 72, then you can start feeling more competitive. Anything below that, then it's sort of like, it's a gamble. People get in below that all the time. But you just got to be aware that that's where those scores are sitting. With GPA, generally anything above a 6.4 is probably where you'd want to be sitting as well. Anything below that, you might also look at, resitting, courses and doing honours and things like that. And especially remember, because the 3rd year of GPA is weighted so heavily, just by adding 1 more year of study by doing an honours or something like that can dramatically change your GPA calculation. Someone's asked if the webinar is recorded. I believe it is. I think the team will put it up on our YouTube page after all of this. Any other questions? All right. Might wrap it up there. Oh, one more. There's one more coming. I'm here until 8 o'clock. So it's all good. what if some years are underloaded in GPA? How did the scores get counted? So I'm assuming, let's say you did like a 3-year course in 4 years. Is that what you mean by underloaded? What you'd need to do is work out how the course credits are allocated, and then you would do it in the chronological order of the course credits, in the same format you would do for the 3 years. I hope that answered your question. The next question is asking about Griffith, 66 and 6.73. Congratulations, that's a really great GPA there to be applying with. I think a 66 could still improve. I think you are competitive, and there is definitely room for you to get a spot in one of your GEMSAS preferences with that. In addition to that, if you've got any bonuses, that's also going to help. But people do get in with scores like that often in GEMSAS. Whether it's Griffith or not, I can't really comment. Griffith has a pretty big cohort this year, so there is a chance, but we don't know what the trends are like. No worries. Well, guys, yeah, we're going to keep doing these sessions on a regular basis. So we'd love to see you come around and have a chat. I think we're going to do a lot more interview-based content, just do some like teaching and make it available to you guys. If you've got any requests for topics that you want us to cover in these public forums, please definitely shoot us an email. We're always looking for good things to talk about and get it out into the community. It sucks when universities keep information to themselves. So we've got whole teams dedicated to researching and putting information together for these sessions. So yeah, definitely shoot us an email if you think there'd be some big topic that you want to know about. Cool. All right, I'll wrap it up there. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.